I really think that every paper that I produce is an achievement. And at the same time, I really feel that I am contributing to the technology of the future. So it's definitely having that ambition to be part of something big, and also having the ambition of being part of the future of technology, right? Because quantum computing will eventually be integrated with the infrastructure of computing, and it will be really part of the computing, let's say, packages that we have accessible to the public in order to solve the big problems, or even, let's say, to solve or even to answer new questions.
Welcome to Women in Quantum, a podcast where we explore the people shaping the future of one of the most fascinating technologies of our time. I'm Candace Gillhooley, and each episode I sit down with brilliant women from across the quantum ecosystem, researchers, engineers, entrepreneurs, and innovators, to hear their stories. We talk about curiosity, career paths, breakthroughs, and the human side of building the quantum future. Because quantum technology isn't just about qubits and algorithms, it's about the people bold enough to imagine what comes next. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Sahar Ben Rached, and she is a quantum computing researcher. Hi, how are you today?
Hi, Candice. Hi. I'm very good. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to speak with you. You have a very
Me too.
exciting background.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. So let's get started. I want to start with where were you born?
I was born in a small town that is in the south of the capital of Tunisia. And I grew up there. I had all of my career path there. And then I left for Germany to start my career as a researcher in quantum computing abroad.
Okay. So when you were a child back in Tunisia, what first sparked your curiosity about science, the universe, physics? When did it all start for you?
So when I was a child, my main interest was mainly in astronomy. So I was mainly, yes, so that's I think how many physicists also start being curious about nature and the universe and the laws behind all that we see and we experience in our life. And my father actually nurtured that curiosity, and he was always with me in, let's say, the events that were held in City of Science in the capital of Tunis. He also provided me, I would say, with the books, any, I would say, activity that was also in local clubs. I was among the first to attend, especially if it's science related and focus on astronomy. He got me a telescope, and that's also how I got to see, let's say, the stars. Well, it was mainly a very, you could also get, I would say, mainly a very good picture of the moon, of the stars, but still, I mean, it was really the thing that actually sparked my curiosity into looking into, okay, how can I actually learn more about these let's say laws or about the nature, the sky especially. I was really fascinated with with everything related, let's say, to the stars, to the planets, the moon, because I had a telescope that helped me actually get more curious and actually hands-on with what I could learn about physics and astronomy specifically. So I would say that was my experience as a child who got interested into science. Eventually, I did not really get specialized in astronomy. I went to the other end of the universe. I was mainly specialized in quantum physics and quantum computing later on. But I would say it's really a very beautiful experience that I had as a child that got me really interested in science in general, and then focusing and specializing in physics when I grew up. So I'm very grateful for that, and I hope, of course, many people, I would say, have a similar experience with their children, or even, I would say, with their siblings, because I think astronomy is the thing that is at the same time fascinating, but also there is a lot that we can learn, I would say, as kids about astronomy. So it's definitely, of course, on the scientific, let's say, level, it's very complex, and it's very, I would say, packed with equations and a lot of science behind it. But at the same time, on the surface, it's a very good start for a child to be really interested in science.
Absolutely. So when you looked around the room and you were in high school, and you were excited about astronomy, excited about science, excited about nature. Were you like the only girl in the room?
No, actually, in Tunisia, many women, or let's say young girls, are very interested in science. Actually, I'm not sure what's really special about Tunisia, but we really don't have that, let's say, empty classrooms. I'll say empty in the sense that we don't have women. A lot of girls actually very interested in science naturally, or let's say they had similar experience to mine. So they got interested in science through, let's say, their curiosity, and then their parents actually supported that and nurtured that curiosity, so they ended up actually going into the scientific path easily. So when I went into high school, actually, no, even the top students in high school, I had the scientific, I would say, path in high school as well. So even the top students were girls. And even when I went into college in Tunisia, there wasn't actually, I would say, big difference between the number of women and men who are interested in science and eventually pursue their career. This, of course, came it's actually a very interesting case in Tunisia because this came, of course, throughout the years. But since I would say maybe 70 or 80 years ago, almost, there was a very big emphasis on giving the chance to women to have their choices on their careers. And of course, there was a lot of support from the parents to for their children in general, not just their let's say not only boys to pursue science, mainly because it looked for the parents, it looked like, of course, a stable career, right? And there is something that they can, of course, leverage for their future. But at the same time, even in Tunisia, you could see a lot of local clubs or even the City of Science in Tunis, the capital. They had an emphasis on promoting science for children. And eventually, yeah, practically speaking, there was no friction, I would say, for women to be interested and then pursuing scientific careers. And that's a very beautiful thing about Tunisia that I'm also quite grateful for.
I have to say I'm very impressed with the culture. There's been several ladies that we have spoken to that whether they were in Iran or Egypt, and they were like looking around the room and they were alone. And, or maybe like one or two others. Do you know what I mean? Nothing
Mm,
of significance, nothing that felt that it wasn't gender rigged. And here it sounds like, in Tunisia, if you were smart and capable, it did not matter if you were a boy or a girl. They educated you and allowed you to pursue what was exciting to you. That's wonderful to hear. So now tell me, so then from Tunisia, you then went, you said to Germany?
yes. My first experience outside of Tunisia was in Germany. So I was there in 2021. I stayed there only for 6 months, and it was for my master thesis internship. I was at KIT, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and that was also my first internship in quantum computing, and it was also within an experimental lab, so it was really exciting. So yes, my first experience outside of Tunisia was in Germany.
Okay, and so that's kind of where quantum found you, and you got to be in a lab, and you said that was incredibly exciting.
Yeah, actually, I got introduced to quantum computing earlier than that. So I started quantum computing late 2020, 2019, sorry.
Okay, okay.
Yes, and around 2 years later, that's when I had my first internship in quantum computing abroad. So yes, I would say academically, I chose to let's say pursue quantum computing. So in my second year of master's, that's also when I had my master thesis internship. But I got to know about quantum computing a bit earlier than that.
Okay. So you were in Germany for 6 months. You were working on an internship, and then where did you go from there?
After the internship, so I graduated back in Tunisia, and then I left to Barcelona, Spain. So I started my PhD at UPC, Politécnica de Catalunya, and now I'm in my last year of PhD. So that's almost 4 years of PhD right now. So yes, Germany, then Spain, and that's mainly to have my PhD there.
You're not the only one that got her PhD in quantum in Spain. I hear this education system there is absolutely fantastic. Um,
Yes.
so do you have any experience in hackathons?
Yes, actually, how I got to know about quantum computing was through hackathons. In December 2019, there was the Qiskit Camp. It was a hackathon that was organized by IBM Quantum in Johannesburg in South Africa. And they got to invite many students from all over the continent. And I was the student who was representing Tunisia in that hackathon. So I was recommended by my professor, who was my quantum mechanics professor for my master's. And I got to that hackathon in South Africa. And that was actually, of course, the first time that I had actually training, let's say, in quantum computing, and I got to talk with the researchers and the people from IBM Quantum, who were, of course, the people who are directly working on quantum computing and building one of the first machines to be available to the public. So practically speaking, that's how I really started with quantum computing. And before going to that hackathon, there weren't many courses online on quantum computing. There was mainly one on Coursera, and I took that course just to get, of course, introduced to the concept of quantum computing and to actually know what topic I will be, let's say, doing the hackathon on. And after that, COVID hit. So it was, yes, the hackathon was December 2019, and by March 2020, so we had the lockdown. And starting from that point, many conferences, many events, many, of course, activities related to IBM Quantum hackathons, and also they had the summer school went online. So a lot of people, of course, got to learn about quantum computing during that year. And I was also among these people.
So looking back when you're first learning about quantum,
Yes.
and there's so much there, what was the most difficult concept you had to wrap your head around early on?
Okay. Yeah. When I started quantum computing, I was in my first year of master's, and my master's was on fundamental physics. So it was in nanophysics and nanotechnology. And it was what we call in Tunisia theoretical physics masters. So, right, so it's not like engineering and it's not applied physics, it's like pure physics theory. But before that, my bachelor's was actually in applied physics and it was on electronics. So it was quite far from what I actually specialized in my master's. So the first challenge was actually how I can start a master's course in theory coming from an applied background. And usually the academic paths, or let's say the academic programs, are quite different. Okay, so we don't study much of theory in applied programs and engineering programs. And also in theory, you don't study much of applied physics. So the first challenge, of course, was how to understand the theory, of course, of quantum mechanics, and then how that actually relates to the technology. So the theory of quantum mechanics, of course, it's fundamental. It's very important to understand as a physicist and to actually have your contribution in quantum computing later on. But also, there is, I would say, a path to take to go from understanding the theory and how we actually, let's say, mirror that to the application in quantum computing. So I was learning both things at the same time. So I was, of course, taking my academic courses in quantum physics. I was doing double the work in order to understand and to catch up with the courses in masters, because again, I come from a different program in the beginning. And at the same time, I was following up on what was new with quantum computing and try to attend as many, let's say, online courses or conferences as possible, of course. And of course, in the second year, that's when we had a specialized course in quantum computing, and that's when it really clicked. Right. So I would say the program was very well designed in the sense that in the first year, we had an overview of, let's say, the theory behind multiple applications of in nanotechnology and nanoscience. And the second year was actually focused on, okay, the field that you learned in the first year, this is the domains of applications, and this is how you actually, let's say, make a career out of the theory that you have learned. And quantum computing was only one course in that semester. And
Mhm.
I really, I would say, focused and excelled in that course because it clicked in my head. Okay, I understand now the theory. I have learned a bit from, let's say, external resources. Now I really get to specialize in it academically. And then, of course, the internship really supported and reinforced that learning path because as I said, I had the internship in an experimental lab. So I went I would say, in a very, very good path. So theory, curiosity, trying to learn on my own, then specializing, and then the experimental part. So I think I was very lucky with how I got introduced into quantum computing and then how I actually specialized in it. And really that really reinforced my decision to make quantum computing a choice for my career and then of course of my specialization. That of course motivated me to pursue a PhD and continue with my research in quantum computing.
Were there any pivotal mentors that helped you decide to pursue this PhD in quantum?
So actually, I was very lucky to know many people who are related to quantum computing from different aspects. So I got to meet researchers, developers, people who were, let's say, providing these programs from within, let's say, the big companies. I also got people who were advocating for the quantum technology, people working in policy. So I think throughout the year, because it has been maybe almost 6 years now, with quantum computing, and I was involved with many activities and many, let's say, programs and events. So I got to know many people coming into quantum computing, but with different backgrounds. Eventually, I, there are, of course, a lot of people that shaped, I would say, how I see the technology path and reinforcing that I actually did a very good choice with choosing quantum computing as a career path. And practically speaking, many people helped me with different aspects. Right, because right now, yes, I'm doing research in quantum computing. So definitely, for example, I am directly, let's say, working with my supervisors who are very established scientists in the field, and they have been quite supportive, and they have been, of course, providing me with everything that I need to accomplish a PhD and contribute to the field. But at the same time, I also got to work with people who were, let's say, organizing big events and conferences in quantum computing. And eventually, they also gave me a perspective on how you do the business and how you actually make, I would say, a commercial solution that could be helpful to let's say, to the general public or even to businesses on how they can adopt quantum computing. So again, yes, I was also very lucky in that aspect, in the sense that I got to know many people coming to quantum computing from different backgrounds, and eventually all of them really had an impact on how I see the technology going and how I'm now making my choices regarding my advancement in my career as a researcher. Practically speaking, there isn't one person that I would say completely, let's say, pivoted my path. But if I had, of course, to pick a name, because at this point, of course, all of them were very, very helpful. And each time, of course, I needed something or I had a question about something, they were very, very responsive and helpful. But pivotal, I would say, probably my quantum mechanics professor who recommended me to go to the hackathon, right? Because at that point I was a student, I was just started actually my program. It was just a few, maybe 2 months into the program, and he had enough trust in me to actually go into the hackathon and represent the country, by the same time learn about the technology itself, and then go back to Tunisia to share my experience. And since that point, it really changed how I made all of my choices regarding doing research and everything. So, yes, I would say my quantum mechanics professor, he had, I would say, pivotal impact on my career.
How has your international experience working across different countries shaped your perspective on science and collaboration?
Okay, so I come from Tunisia, which is a very good country to, for example, to do engineering, right? But in terms of research, research is very investment heavy, I would say. It's quite costly, and usually the people who do research, usually they don't stay in Tunisia, which is very unfortunate. But at the same time, if you consider that let's say research and development is very costly and it really needs an infrastructure behind it to succeed, then unfortunately Tunisia right now doesn't have that infrastructure. You reach a limit, I would say, in Tunisia, after which you really need to make a decision. Do you want to pursue do you want to pursue research in general? Then at that point, probably your best choice is to leave the country. So I always say that my background is Tunisian. So I was trained in Tunisia. I was there all up to, I would say, to my master's degree. I was trained and I had all of my career in Tunisia, but the application was abroad. right? So the reinforcement, the support, the application, actually leveraging what you learned was abroad, which is, of course, I would say the best choice I had to make at that point. And at the same time, it's an enriching experience on a personal level, right? So working with people from different backgrounds, actually going to Europe and see how research, I would say, is done there with the infrastructure that they have, with multiple parties actually being involved with reinforcing this infrastructure and developing it, and actually leveraging the science that is produced in universities and actually commercializing it. That's actually an aspect that I didn't get to experience in Tunisia, and Europe was a very good example to provide that, because Europe, I think the strongest point in Europe was, yes, reinforcing the research part. So in universities, you could see there is a lot of focus on innovation. Every time there was actually an interesting application for any technology that was being developed, they were fast into capturing that value and commercializing it. So Europe, I think, was a very good place to learn about that. And then now I moved to Toronto, so I'm not based in Europe anymore. And now Toronto is an even more different ecosystem. So I'm quite new here. I still haven't made my conclusions, but I think here they're quite fast, I would say. So yeah, I think the speed, I think, is now a different factor or a new factor that is being added into the equation of how I'm trying to understand how these ecosystems are being built. And it's a very interesting aspect because, okay, of course, everyone would like to be fast, right? Okay, but how fast can you go when you really are working with these, let's say, front-end technologies, right? That's when, let's say, the regulations come into play, and everything that is related to the commercialization and extracting value early on in order to have return on investment. So that's actually a cycle that seems to be, I would say, quite fast to do here in Canada, and I would really like to understand how it is done. And eventually, of course, I would like to project that into Africa and Tunisia. So would it be possible to actually repeat the same experiences or models in Tunisia or in Africa as a let's say a bigger scale? The question, of course, is very hard to answer, because you cannot just take these models or these factors and try to project them on a different environment. Definitely, you need to take into account what is happening on the ground and what was already done and how you can improve on that. And if you have to start from zero, then okay, what would be the best model to apply in places like Tunisia or, let's say, nearby countries? This is actually a discussion that is always being brought up, be it, of course, within rooms where we have African researchers and the developers who are also interested into bringing quantum computing into the continent. And there is an immense work that is being done on that aspect. We have multiple groups, we have multiple consortia that are specialized in these topics. But at the same time, building an ecosystem is not, I would say, an easy task, and it cannot be done, I would say, within a few years. It definitely takes a long-term commitment. And we are trying to engage many people who are decision makers and eventually who are the people who will, let's say, make or break the deals, or let's say support or not support the work that we are proposing, or let's say the paths or the plan of actions that we are proposing. And definitely, of course, with all of this work, I'm 100% sure that someday we will find the results. Of course, no effort goes into waste, and definitely with this emergence of multiple brilliant minds that are working to solve one problem, or even to, let's say, advance on the infrastructure of Africa, to be very specific, then definitely it's going to pay off at some point, because we are the generation of the future, right? So if we have this perspective, I would say, and this motivation to build our countries and to actually give back to where we came from, then definitely we will be the decision makers someday, and we will make our vision a reality. And until we reach that day, of course, we are still working on that.
Fantastic. So, what's one misconception about quantum computing you wish more people understood?
So the misconception, I would say, is really, it's not a misconception, where I think it's an underestimation about how hard it is actually to build quantum computers. Definitely, we have seen, of course, with the commercialization of quantum computing, maybe within the last 4 to 5 years, it has really gained the momentum that people are actually expecting to see results from all of the investment that has been done. So, of course, you see every now and then the breakthroughs, and those breakthroughs, of course, get amplified and presented as, okay, this is, let's say, the transistor moment of quantum computing, or this is the ChatGPT moment of quantum computing. And I understand, of course, the narrative behind it is that we really would like to see the fruits of all of these efforts and all of these investments and times and again, brilliant people working on a single problem. But of course, the people who are really hands-on with the technology know how it's really difficult to actually build these systems. And the breakthroughs are very important milestones along the path, but they are not, I would say, the destination. We still have a lot of milestones to reach as a community, coming from research or even from industry. And eventually, of course, we have more or less a clear path on how we can build these systems, but at the same time, there are a lot of, let's say, issues or unexpected, let's say, things that you find along the way that really get us to rethink about the problem, or even to find or to, let's say, to overcome these issues, to be very short. So yes, it's a fascinating technology. It definitely has potential. The science supports it. We have, of course, established theories about this, but building the systems themselves, it turned out to be a much harder problem than we had anticipated in the beginning. And it's very difficult to put a timeline on when we will actually exactly reach those, let's say, milestones, the big milestones, which are like providing a commercial and stable quantum computer. I don't think anyone has a definite answer to that, but we're collecting clues, right? As we are progressing, as we have milestones, we are collecting the clues to put a timeline on this technology development, and actually provide a consistent technology development roadmap coming from all parties that would more or less answer the question of when will we have quantum computers. So I think it's not a misconception, but it's an underestimation of how difficult this task is. And it's, of course, the role of the people who are communicating about the technology itself to explain that it's definitely an exciting technology, and it's worth the investment, and it's worth all of this time and effort being put into a single direction. But at the same time, we need to be very realistic and faithful about the translation of these technology milestones or science milestones into commercial value. Yes, so practically speaking, I think that's the thing that is, I think it's on the mind of many researchers in the field. But at the same time, I personally understand the narrative behind hyping up quantum technology.
So, what would you say to young women in university to get them excited about what's going on in quantum and about their role that they could play? What kind of skills? What would you tell them? What kind of skills should they try to develop?
Okay, so I think everyone who's coming from a background, whether it's commercial background, business development, or science and technology, have a place in the quantum computing ecosystem, simply because it takes a village, right, to make the technology commercial and to have value from it. So if you are a scientist, I would say, or you have an interest in becoming a scientist or researcher in quantum computing, then I think the clearest paths are usually coming from engineering, computer science, and software engineering and physics. I think these are, let's say, the clearest paths. Eventually, of course, depending on what you'd like to specialize in, whether it's hardware development, then having an experimental experience is very important. Try to have, let's say, the internships or even the academic programs leaned more towards experimental, let's say, or applied sciences. And if you'd like to be specialized more into the theory, then definitely, of course, academic paths could be coming from physics, math, or pure computer science, in order to have your career as a theorist, for example, in quantum information science or quantum computing, or even algorithm developer or algorithm designer. So definitely, those are, let's say, skills that we are very much, let's say, looking for, in the sense that we really need people who look into the science, understand how we can use quantum computers, and actually build and design algorithms based on that science. Depending, of course, on the interest of the person who would like to pursue this career path. But if I want to provide, I would say, generic answer, it would be really try to maximize, I would say, your skills in physics, math, and computer science, just to be very brief. But of course, beyond the scientists and the researchers in the field, we have people who are doing the business, who are communicating about the science, who are building even companies around these milestones that we are reaching in quantum computing and quantum technology development. And it takes, of course, the work of multiple people from different perspectives to build and sustain a technology on a commercial perspective. So definitely people who are also into business development for deep technology. For example, we can mirror what happened with AI, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, right? So the experience of those people must be very valuable for quantum computing at this moment, because they
Right.
were among the very first people who saw, let's say, the potential in AI, when, of course, at that point, it wasn't very mature. You couldn't really see what's the value behind all of this, but they still built and sustained businesses behind it. So I think we need those type of people and those type of skills in quantum computing at this moment as well. So that's also quite valuable. Everything also related to education for all grades, I would say, or for all ages, because if we are talking about quantum computing, then we are talking about an industry that will affect, let's say, the job market, or even to affect the industry in the future. So definitely we need to train people who will be able to work with this technology and use it in the long run. And that definitely also needs a change on the academic part, and eventually the adaptation of the science and technology paths, even for younger learners, or let's say kids. Yeah, so practically speaking, or to be very short and concise, if you are interested in pursuing a scientific path in quantum computing, then definitely you need to maximize your skills on physics, math, and computer science. If you'd like to work more on the business side, then definitely you can learn from the experience of the early business development people who worked on AI and mirror their experience in order to push for quantum computing to the commercial side.
What do you see as the most promising near-term applications of quantum computing?
So depending on how we can define near term, right? So are we talking about a year, 5 years, 10 years? I think it's very important to be also realistic about the timeline itself, just to be, I would say, quite clear on where we are right now and where we can go within the next few years. Computing, I think it's really accelerating quite fast, especially with the milestones that we are seeing with, let's say, building fault-tolerant systems and the quantum error correction. Also, so it's if we of course follow the public roadmaps, then 2030, I think, would be the first year where we can see a stable and commercial processor. But of course, that's an estimation, and definitely we trust the people behind those estimations because they know what they are doing, and definitely they have been quite consistent in delivering their milestones. So we can definitely follow their, let's say, announcement and speeches and everything. But at the same time, it's in the future, right? You never know what happens. You never know how things will change and when will the investment will be directed to. If we look into communications at this point is really focusing on updating the infrastructure for for supporting quantum communications, because we also have the ambition of building quantum secure networks. So I think at this point, we are advancing quite well, although it's a matter of engineering and optimization, right? So we have the first commercial products, but at the same time, they are not doing as well as they should. So a lot of focus is now being put on, let's say, improving and optimizing these systems or these components of the network in order to ensure that there is, I would say, a stable network that can be installed, I would say, in the near term. Quantum sensors, although to be honest, I don't have a deep, I would say, expertise on quantum sensors, right? I understand that there is quite, let's say, a wide application domains for quantum sensing, and already we are seeing commercial products being deployed even in industrial, let's say, operations. And practically speaking, that's where the value of quantum technology is now being extracted. And that's a very good thing because it definitely supports the fact that quantum technologies with that level works. We already know that nanotechnology has multiple applications, but at the same time, we need also to be optimistic, but at the same realistic with the integration of quantum computing and communications. This is all to say that it's going to take some time. I'm not expecting it to be, let's say, that far ahead. I'm definitely seeing that there will be value in commercial value in these technologies quite soon because it is accelerating with a very, very interesting pace. I'm definitely optimistic about reaching very important milestones very, very soon. And we have the science that backs it up. So sooner or later, it's just going to become an engineering problem, and we will find the solutions to all of the issues that are coming up.
Your research focuses on quantum computer architecture and communication between cores in modular quantum processors. Can you explain that in a way a curious beginner can understand?
Yeah. So what we are trying to build is a modular processor in which we have multiple chips which are interconnected via a network. So it is very similar, let's say, to how we see the, let's say, quantum data centers, right? We have racks of processors which are interconnected via, let's say, usually, let's say, direct cables between those processors. And eventually, this architecture is quite scalable, right? It's just a matter of adding more processors, and eventually that contributes to having a higher computation capacity. So the same principle we are trying to apply into quantum computing. So we are also aiming to have this distributed architecture in which we have multiple QPUs, which are interconnected together to increase the number of physical qubits, but at the same time to increase the computing capacity. That's for distributed quantum computing. So I think that's the closest image to what a full scale or let's say large scale quantum computer will look like, similar to what we see right now in data centers, right? When we have classical chips interconnected via networks. Now, if we look at the small scale of chips, so the question that we started with is, so qubits are fragile entities, right? If we put
Mhm.
many qubits into a single chip, then they will start interfering with each other's states, and eventually they will make the computations, let's say, mediocre, or let's say we will have very low fidelity results. Eventually, just to say that if we put many qubits into a single chip, then eventually we will have bad results with the computation. So the problem that we are tackling at this point is how we can distance, let's say, these qubits, so such that we protect the states and we isolate the qubits, and at the same time we keep on increasing the number of physical qubits that is necessary to do the computations. And that's where the modular approach comes into play, in the sense that instead of packing multiple qubits into a single chip, we need to distribute them onto multiple chips. And then we use a quantum network on chip in order to do this link between the chips. And eventually, we have multiple chips acting as if they were one big chip. So that's the modular approach. There are multiple benefits to this one. First of all, of course, we're increasing the qubit isolation. So we are more or less protecting the quantum state that are held at the qubit level. We also are, let's say, yeah, increasing the capacity of quantum chips by increasing the number of physical qubits within a single system. And at the same time, we are working on, let's say, limiting the hardware scale, the control hardware scalability, right? Because at this point, in order to control qubits, for example, in superconducting qubits, you need at least two cables which are connected to each qubit to control and read out its state. But if we keep on adding the same number of cables, then eventually there will be a bottleneck on the control part as well. So what we are trying to do is to solve that problem as well, which is how we can scale the number of qubits within a single system, but at the same time we are not, let's say, hindered by the scalability of the cable part as well, or the control part as well. So there are, let's say, fundamental physical limitations to having one chip that would support the physical qubits. So as I said, so they would be starting to interfering with each other, and it's just not scalable on the physical part. But also on the manufacturing side, it makes sense, right? So if we have a modular processor, in the sense that we have multiple chips that are interconnected, then, for example, let's say one chip fails, then it would be easy to find out where the failure happened and to just change that module or to replace it instead of just throwing away the entire chip and having to start again. So on the manufacturing part as well, it's scalable in the sense that if you want to increase, sorry, the if you want to increase the computational power or the computational capacity, then you know that it's just a matter of interconnecting another chip. This is, of course, to simplify the rationale behind choosing to scale quantum computers using the modular and distributed quantum computing approach. But on the physical side or on the industrial side, how we can build these systems is also not an easy task because at this point, we have the computing part, so building the chips themselves. But at the same time, we have a new component that is interfering with the computation, which is the communication part. So usually what we use these on-chip communication networks for is to do the transfer of quantum states between modules or even to apply remote gates. And either way, it's an overhead, right? It's additional tasks, it's an additional noise factor. And now I would say we have a new system that we need to take care of, which is the communication part. So we need to design the best protocols. We need to design the best communication channels, and we need to choose, of course, everything that is related to the middleware layers. So everything that is related to the compilation part, the networking part, the management part, the workflow part. So as you can see, making a decision to go into a modular processor will not affect just the processor itself, it will affect the entire system and even the access to these quantum computers via the cloud services or even on-premise, let's say, access. Right now, there is a consensus that this is the best approach to scale quantum computers. We have seen multiple, for example, companies from with different qubit modalities. So this is not really specific to superconducting quantum computers. It's really becoming more of a universal approach to scaling quantum computers. And this is very good news in the sense that I would say there is a consensus, or there is, I would say, a know-how on how we can scale quantum computers. And we have seen, as I said, multiple industries or industrial hardware providers who support this, who have adopted this technology or this approach, and they are providing it and publishing it in their roadmaps. So it's, I would say, applicable. And it can be used in different qubit modalities. And eventually, I think that's the way to go. It's really to go modular and distributed. And we will see how it goes on the implementation side, of course. There will be more challenges to overcome, but right now it seems to be the most plausible way to do it.
So, beyond technology, what personal values drive your work in science and community?
Definitely it's curiosity itself. I mean, I really like to work in this complex environments and these, let's say, challenging, let's say, topics. It's very intellectually stimulating, but at the same time, it's very exciting, right? You are working on something that is asking big questions, and every result that you reach is really a milestone to celebrate. So there is real value in doing research in quantum computing, both on the professional side, but also on the personal side. I really think that every paper that I produce is an achievement. And at the same time, I really feel that I am contributing to the technology of the future. So it's definitely having that ambition to be part of something big, and also having the ambition of being part of the future of technology, right? Because quantum computing will eventually be integrated with the infrastructure of computing, and it will be really part of the computing, let's say, packages that we have accessible to the public in order to solve the big problems, or even, let's say, to solve or even to answer new questions. And being part of something of this scale is really exciting professionally and personally. So I think that has been my motivation so far. So for 6 years, it was really every time I even find myself working on a new topic that seems challenging at the beginning, but eventually, of course, you learn and you advance. The one thing that keeps, of course, repeating itself is me telling myself that I'm working on something really big, right? And being part of something that is going to be quite fundamental and going to be quite useful in the future is quite rewarding. So that's why even continuing with the research path has been motivated by this, let's say, personal curiosity and personal ambition. And of course, professionally, that's also going to be my motivation. So I would say that's the main motivator, or let's say the main reason why I continue to work in quantum computing. It's that vision that you have for the technology and wanting to be part of that vision and to be part of something big.
How do you stay motivated during setbacks or complex research challenges?
Um, so that's the motivation part is really tricky, right? Because it's a very challenging, I would say, field. You are always encountered with new sciences. You always have to keep up with the new milestones being achieved. So, being, let's say, research papers or even publications from the industry, it's very important, of course, to stay up to date with how everything is going, and it's really moving quite fast. So, actually, it's very hard to catch up. But at the same time, that's only telling you that we are on the right path. So, knowing that there is a reward at the end, I would say, in the sense that all of this effort is really for building something big and for building the infrastructure of the future of computing. I think that's the main reason why I continue to work. Now, if we look at a small scale, in the sense that, okay, how do I deal with the setbacks, for example, on working on something challenging that's related to my PhD? I usually give it time. I know it's a hard science, and I try not to, let's say, demotivate myself by saying, oh, okay, this is too hard. I just need to leave. This is not for me. I just try to give it time. The learning curve, I think everyone should be, I would say, familiar with this concept, in the sense that you are never an expert from day one, right? And every time you are trying to answer new questions, whether they are hard or simple, it's still a new concept that you are introducing to your brain. So it definitely takes time to reach the mastery level. Probably in quantum computing, that learning curve is even steeper. So I'm not sure, of course, if they had anything to support that, but it's definitely, I would say, a challenging field to work in. So that's what I do. I just keep that in mind. It's just a normal process, and I just need to give it some time. I also ask for help whenever I don't understand anything. I mean, I was very lucky to meet many people involved in quantum computing from different aspects, and if something is really difficult and challenging for me, I just reach out to the person that I know would help me. And usually they are quite responsive, quite helpful. And yes, that's practically how I have been advancing on the PhD itself, but also on other projects that I work on. And it's I think at this point still a very collaborative and open community. And if there is anything that is related to learning new concepts or understanding in depth the difficult concepts, there is always someone who can help you. Probably they don't have the full answers, or they don't specifically, let's say, answer your question, because that really depends on what you are working on. Some questions are just not clear at this point, but there is always a path to work on that problem, and at least to have a step ahead on what's already being provided. And that's, I think, how research works in general, right? So we are really at the forefront of science, so we are really answering the questions, and we don't expect, let's say, to have ready answers already being provided out there. So just a thought process that needs the contribution of more people to help you on. And then, of course, it really depends on how patient and how, let's say, persistent you are with the research part.
I understand that you helped co-found Q Tunisia to
Yes.
build a quantum community. What inspired you to start that initiative?
So before Q Tunisia, so I was in the hackathon in Johannesburg, and I also helped to organize a summer school in my university. It was also on quantum computing, so we had maybe like 3 months of training in quantum computing, and I was leading that part. And I saw a lot of curiosity from the students in Tunisia about quantum computing. Some people actually attended these trainings and these activities, and eventually they also chose quantum computing as a career path. So I saw the impact, I saw the value, and I saw people being quite curious. So that's why we went with Q World programs, because they're well established. there is an infrastructure behind it. There are people who are supportive. So it was, I would say, the right choice to present a community-driven, let's say, initiative in the sense that we really wanted people to learn about quantum computing with free courses and with a supportive community. I worked in Tunisia for, I think, 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, I believe. And then, of course, other people came in, and now Tunisia actually is continuing its activity with new people. And the same motivation and the same enthusiasm about quantum computing is still on. So I think that's the best thing you can provide to the community of science enthusiasts, or even, let's say, students, STEM students in your community, is to do your part in, let's say, teaching about new topics and sharing your knowledge. And especially that at that point, there weren't many people who got a hands-on experience my age in Tunisia. So back then, there were, of course, senior scientists in quantum computing abroad who were very supportive of the initiative, and they also attended some of our activities. They provided talks to talk about their experience and about their contribution in quantum computing, and that was very inspiring, and that was very helpful also to have a model of how you can actually do quantum computing and what type of career you can have in quantum computing. So bridging, I would say, that part, having the connection with senior scientists and introducing them to the community of developers in Tunisia was really, I would say, an interesting thing that we did in Tunisia. And besides that, the trainings were very helpful. They, as I said, so some people actually took advantage of these trainings to get to know more about quantum computing, and they liked it so much that they actually went on to have a career in the field. I really am happy with those experiences, and I definitely see that they were very valuable. And I still believe that it's one of the best things that you can do to your community is to share your experience and to share your knowledge with them.
This has been absolutely fascinating. I have loved our conversation. I have learned a lot. I think our audience is going to love it. Is there anything else that you would like to leave us with that we can leave us with about what you're doing and where to find out more about you?
Okay, so thank you so much, Candace, for the conversation. It was a really lovely time. I am so happy to see that you are also interviewing a lot of women within the series of Women in Quantum, and I'm so happy and honored to be one of them. So thank you so much for giving me the time and the space to express my opinions and to share, of course, of my experience. I hope a lot of people would find this inspiring and would also like to know more about quantum computing, and why not pursue a career in quantum computing. It's a very beautiful and fascinating field, and I think it is really worth all of this effort and all of this investment being put into a single direction, which is to develop and to build quantum computers. It's it ha- the field has shown, I would say, quite an interesting part of, let's say, the curiosity of people. And when actually scientists put let's say, a lot of effort into one direction, you could see really interesting things being developed and interesting science being produced. Of course, the contribution of people who are trying to commercialize this technology and to provide the value of the technology early on has been immense and has been quite important. And I think they are the people who will really bridge, let's say, the science and the industry for the commercial adoption, and eventually they will be the people who will be providing the value of quantum technology to the public. And I hope that happens sooner than later, in order for everyone to also, let's say, take advantage also of this technology, and eventually they would find it helpful, I hope, in their industries and their works. So I am usually on LinkedIn if you'd like to reach out, and if you'd like me to help you with anything, and I hope I can answer some of your questions if you have any, or even if you'd like to learn anything about my experience, I hope I can help you with anything that may make the path clearer for you. So yes, I'm usually on LinkedIn, and probably you are going to link my account. So I would be very happy to connect with anyone who is interested.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Sahar. I really appreciate it. I love your perspective. I think many people are going to really take something out of your story. And thank you again for your time today. I'm going to let
Thank
the
you,
music,
Candace.
thank you. I'm going to let the music take us out.